Welcome to Secrets of a Bridal Seamstress podcast, where we hear stories from fellow seamstresses just like you. We're able to share their success stories. We learn from wedding industry pros for the best business tips, and we get to hear from fellow sewists and crafters to hopefully inspire our creativity and our love for sewing. I'm so glad that you're here. And if you're a bridal seamstress, I'd also like to invite you to check out our Bridal Seamstress business membership. You can head to secretsofabridalseamstresspodcast.com and get on the wait list for our business community. It opens next on March 1st, and we would love to have you join us. We have a community of women that can testify to the power of genuine connection, friendship, vulnerability, the power of our six-figure seamstress method, and the genuine connection found in a business mentorship like this. All right, let's dive into the episode. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Secrets of Bridal Seamstress. Today's episode comes from a recent collaboration that I did with DeeDee Anderson from the Anderson Academy. So DeeDee recently hosted a symposium for bridal seamstresses with the topic of Bridezillas. And I contributed with this training of how to move forward professionally and emotionally after working with a bridezilla. And I feel pretty passionately about this topic, so I want to share this with you in the form of a podcast episode. And I hope this is encouraging for you because at some point, we're all going to experience a difficult bride. And what's important is that we have the tools to successfully move forward in a healthy way, continue to serve our clients and not feel like super jaded by the experience, to learn from the experience and just become better seamstresses for it. So I hope this is encouraging to you. If you have any questions about this topic in particular, please reach out to me on Instagram at Secrets of Bridal Seamstress, or if you're on my email list and you receive emails from me, you can hit reply, and I love those kind of conversations. So I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope this is an encouragement for you guys. Hello, fellow seamstresses. I'm so excited you're here. I'm so excited to be here and delighted that we get to tackle this common issue among all bridal seamstresses, Bridezillas. My name is Nadine Bozeman. I host the Secrets of a Bridal Seamstress membership and podcast. You can find the podcast on all of your favorite streaming services. We're also on YouTube. And each week I interview fellow seamstresses or I feature a wedding pro to talk about specific niches within the bridal alterations business. So I'd love to have you tune in. And our membership opens twice a year. Our next opening will be in March, and we delve into the strategies needed to build a successful and a sustainable bridal alterations business. We use the six-figure seamstress method to help you break that barrier and get to six figures in a year. And I'd love to help you. If you're interested in learning more, you can tune into the podcast. You can shoot me a DM on Instagram or email me, and I'd love to answer questions. But today, let's dive into Bridezillas. And particularly, I'm here to talk to you about how to move on emotionally and professionally from a bridezilla situation. Because let's get real, it kind of is a trauma, okay? Like, no matter how you slice it, no matter how seasoned you are as a bridal seamstress, difficult clients can just shake us up. And it's so important to have tools in place so that you know you're not the crazy one. Here's how to move forward emotionally. Here's how to take professional accountability too for these situations. So I want to give you just several tools to use for the next time the situation arises, because we can't avoid it when we're working with human beings. There's going to be some kind of conflict or misunderstanding along the way. It's normal. It's almost like a rite of passage as a bridal seamstress. But what's important is that we don't let these situations define us or hold us back from growing because of the fear that the experience put in the back of our minds. So I remember my first bridezilla experience. And what's funny is I now probably wouldn't label her a bridezilla. I think just in the moment I was nervous. It was within my first 2 years of being a full-time bridal seamstress. This was back in 2017, 17 or 18. And I was so nervous because it was my first teensy tiny little conflict. I wouldn't even call it a conflict. She had questions and I was like, ah! And I didn't know how to lower the temperature in the room. I didn't know how to answer questions calmly or keep my voice calm, and things escalated because of my own response. So I know that in other trainings, you're already hearing like tools and resources of how to get through the situation in the moment, like how to take the control back. And I'm so excited about that. So hopefully you may avoid some of the situations that I could have avoided if I just had a little bit more like wherewithal. But I've also learned a few tools of how to move forward and move past it in confidence and just as a better seamstress for the next bride. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to separate yourself from the situation emotionally and professionally. We're going to talk about how to reflect honestly professionally, which can be kind of tricky, I know. And then also how to close the chapter and move on to better serve the next client. We don't want this stuff to stick with us, right? Or always like just come to mind next time we think about a future bride. So let's first talk about how to emotionally step back from a situation and put ourselves in a place where we actually can reflect honestly. So the first thing I want you to think about when you're reflecting on a situation, whether it's like 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago, when we have this kind of encounter with a bride, you get that like feeling. I think it's like a heavy stomach feeling, like my heart just sinks, like my blood, just think about it. No, okay. My blood pressure rises, you just feel that stress and it's like a physical response to the situation. So that's normal. And that's what we want to help you move past quicker. It's normal to have that kind of response, but it's not normal to have it stick with you for a long time, for more than like a day or two, really. And I'd like for it to even roll off your back sooner than 48 hours later or whatever. So when you first think about a situation, I want you to consider how you would respond to this story or this situation if a friend was the seamstress, not you. And the reason I want to encourage you to do that is because we can be so hard on ourselves. And sometimes the first thing we want to do is be like, oh my gosh, you're such an idiot. Like, they were red flags. Why didn't you see the red flags? Like, why did you say you could change the size of this dress? Why did you say that she could change her shoes? Or like, why didn't you just say this in the moment? We can be so hard on ourselves. And it's like, we go insane because we keep trying to change the scenario that's already happened or what we could have, should have said. So think about the situation from the view of your friend because your friends love you. They know that you're an awesome seamstress. They know that you have good motives and they trust those motives and they want the best for you. And so you want to speak to yourself with the kind voice of a good friend instead of your own critical voice as a business owner, right? That's going to make a big difference. Second thing I want you to do is to take a step back and almost look at the situation with a bird's eye view. So you're not just seeing the bride from your own perspective, like hearing the words that she said, the tone of voice, feeling in your body what you felt in the moment. Take a step back and it's almost like you're like looking over that fitting space. So you're over here, the bride's over here, mom's over here, or whatever. So you're just kind of seeing the whole situation for what it is. And what that does is it helps you see even beyond what happened in the fitting space. So you're able to see even farther back when you were working on the dress, or you could kind of see farther back when the bride was in the car, what stressors may have been triggering her before she even came to the fitting space. You're just able to see the surrounding circumstances beyond what was happening in the moment from your point of view when you're the one sweating in the fitting room. Okay, so look at this with a bird's eye view. I want you to also understand I'm trying to think of how to word this. There's a phrase called projecting, when people project their feelings, their thoughts on others. And this is actually like a really fascinating topic. So if you're interested in like human psyche at all, you could totally do a deep dive into this. But when I remember there was one of my mentors when I first started sewing, she's actually in like the more so like the fashion world than bridal sewing, but she worked a lot with brides. She's a bridal stylist. And she had told me when a bride walks in the room or walks into your studio, you have to think about everything that she's already bringing in with her. And 95% of the time, what she's upset about has nothing to do with you or your work, but it has so much to do with herself and what she's dealing with. And that's being projected onto you. And I was like, projected onto me? Like, this was, yeah, maybe like 7 years ago. And so now I feel like the phrase is a little bit more common, but then I was like, what does that mean? But it was so telling because when we think about, these comments that brides or that moms might say to us, oh, so almost wanting to instigate feelings of insecurity, or you kind of feel a bit like judged by the bride or by her little party or whatever, those comments could be projections of how they're just feeling themselves. So when a bride is coming in your space, let's use an example of a bride who's nervous about her big day. She's already blown her budget. She's feeling really insecure because all of a sudden now she realizes that hundreds of people are going to be looking at her cleavage and this part of her arms. And she's so in her own head about it. So it's easier for her to put some kind of blame on you because you're standing there. And we're going to get to the part of reflecting honestly, because this might not be the whole issue here, but this could definitely be part of the issue, okay? So we're going to get to honest reflection later. But for now, just hear me out on what projecting could be. So if somebody has their own insecurities that they already have inside their head, they could just easily pin it on you to make themselves feel better. And it might not be intentional. Most of the time, it's not intentional, but it's just a way to kind of ease and self-soothe themselves by putting some of the stress on you and projecting their own feelings onto you. So that's a whole new topic, but I really feel like if you were more familiar with what projecting is, this will help you not only with brides, but it can help you if you have like, I don't know, like interesting wedding pros that you have to work with that just kind of have like a weird vibe, or maybe like local colleagues that you're like, I don't know what, like, where is this coming from? Oftentimes it has to do with their own internal struggles, their own internal insecurities that they're projecting onto you. And when you grasp that, it can just be so easy to be like, okay, whatever. This has nothing to do with me, but this has a lot to do with you. And as a professional, when we're working with clients, it's really important that we have that skill to like navigate what is truth and what are feelings and presumptions. And I know I can decipher what is what. You know, I can take responsibility for my work and how I can change that. And I can also decipher when this is your feelings, your stress that you're projecting onto me. So I would really encourage you to get yourself familiar with this theory of projecting. It's not a theory, but what's it called? Method? This thing called projecting. It's very, very helpful, okay? And this is such a great tool to help you separate yourself from the situation because you're not like engulfed, like intertwined with this bridezilla. It's like she's in this space, she's kind of having a rough day, and you're in this space, you're having a good day. And you have good skills, and you are two separate entities. It does not have to be combined, and she does not have to like pull you in. Okay. I'd also really encourage you, and I know this is easier said than done, but a great tool to help you move forward from icky situations like this starts upstream, and it is having a life outside of work. I know you're like, why didn't you tell me this a year ago? But maybe for 2025, you can really work on this. I encourage you to have friendships and relationships and hobbies and interests and goals beyond your business. Because when we just pour our heart and soul and our whole being and our identity into our work and into our business, it can be so difficult to separate the two, ourself from all of what I just listed. When we have a work conflict, we take it home with us. It's part of who we are, and it's so difficult to move on, as opposed to having this very defined, clearly defined line between life and work. And when there's something that's happening at work, you can come home, you can have dinner with friends, you can pick up that book that you've really been enjoying, and you have a separate life happening here. You have some separate interests. Maybe you play pickleball. I don't know. Maybe you have a different craft besides sewing. And this is such an important part of your life to develop because this is your identity. This is who you are. This is work. This is how you're paying the bills. You can love your job and you can really love your career and pour so much into your clients, but there is a clear separation between the two. And so when we merge our identity with our sewing and with our clients and with those business goals, like this is my identity, it gets really muddy and it's very difficult for us to move forward in any type of conflict, whether with a bride or a wedding pro or a weird wedding pro situation, like worked a wedding together, the wedding planner looked at me weird. I don't know, like, okay, you go home and you move on, right? Instead of it being your identity. So that's a side note, but that could maybe be a goal for you in 2025. I also want to give you one final tip to separate yourself emotionally from the situation before we move on. And that is carefully choose who you share the story with. It's natural for us to want to talk about this nonstop. Like, oh my gosh, this just happened to me. We want to post about it everywhere. You want to tell all of your sewing friends. You want to tell like your partner and your family and your friends, and you talk about it at church. It's like you can't stop talking about it. And sometimes that can feel good initially, but what it does, it just takes over and it builds up this drama so you really cannot escape it. And it just creates this replay in your mind. And what it also does over time is it helps you remember, it causes you to remember the situation actually inaccurately, because the more that you're telling the story, there's some exaggerations here, and there's some like literally made up stuff over here, because you're trying to self-soothe as you're telling the story over and over and regurgitating it. So if you can choose like a couple close, maybe close sewing friends and your partner that you share with, and then that's it. That's it. Because you don't need to have it infect all these other relationships, and you don't need to have it just circling over and over in your mind. It's like if you need to get off your chest, that's understandable. Have a few people that you trust that you can do that with, and then stop. You're doing yourself a favor if you can just stop. All right, let's move on to the next point, which can be a little bit tricky, but it is really such a gift. And let me tell you why. I want you to be able to move forward with honest reflection. Okay, sometimes and if you had listened to the podcast that DeeDee and I had recently, we talked briefly about this, that I feel like sometimes it's one way or the other when I hear these Bridezilla stories. Sometimes bridal seamstresses will say it's all the bride's fault. Like, she came in, she was crazy. Her mom was so annoying. Like, her mom should have actually done the sewing herself because she was like always butting in. Or the bride was on Ozempic. So like there was no way for me to be able to catch up with her weight loss. Like, we can put everything on the bride, which, like I mentioned earlier, with when it comes to projecting, if we have a difficult client, the client may be projecting some negativity that we have to have clarity to decipher. However, the flip side of that is that we as seamstresses take the blame for everything. Like, oh my gosh, I should have seen the red flags. I should have done this differently. I didn't really know how to sew this. I don't have any skills. I don't know why I took on this project. It was way too difficult for me. And we can take up all the blame. And it's like one or the other. There is a happy medium, though. I feel like with every conflict, whether it's with a bride or whoever, a professional conflict always requires some type of reflection so we can move forward and grow from it, right? Become better bridal seamstresses from these situations. So when you're thinking about the difficult situation, and this again goes back to only telling a few people because you want to have clarity in how you remember it. You may even want to take notes. I've done this before. I've like typed out what has happened. This is what happened. And I just get all the steps out so that it's like clear in my mind. So go from like when they booked with you, where was the first red flag? What was the difficulty in the sewing? Could that have been communicated better? So go through each scenario clearly and honestly with yourself. You're the only one who's doing this. You're just doing this with yourself, right? So we got to be honest with ourselves, right? And I want you to think about what could have been done differently for a different outcome. So in our membership, we talk about the difference between living at effect and living at cause. And this is just such a great concept to grasp. When we're living at effect, it means that we are kind of the victim of whatever life throws at us. As bridal seamstresses, we just have to deal with whoever comes through the door, and we better have some good tools to deal with them because we have no control. We don't know. We're working with strangers, so they could be psychopaths for all we know, right? We're the victim in those situations. And really, there's no growth from that, because if we're always the victim and we have no control of the situation, then there's no hope. It just feels very hopeless to me. If you're living at cause, it means that you are responsible for what's coming into your life. You're setting the boundaries, you're setting the rules, you're setting the contract, right? You know where this is going. And it helps you take the power back because you are now empowered to educate your clients specifically on what it is to work with you and how you expect your clients to behave with you. And I know there's no 100% guarantee, but I can guarantee that this will significantly lessen the number of bridezillas or difficult clients that you work with. Because as bridal seamstresses, we know that our clients are only responsible for the the communication that has been clearly and fairly shared with our clients. So we can't expect them to know what our boundaries are, what we will charge them for, what we're not going to charge them for, what an extra fitting is going to cost. We can't expect them to know all these things if we don't clearly communicate that to them in advance. So I always get like annoyed when people bring in a stupid Starbucks drink in my shop. I'm like, it's cute up in here. Like, don't spill anything. But I don't have a sign on my door. I don't have an email that goes out and says, don't bring any food or beverages, keep your, frosty drinks in the car, whatever. So if I want that to change, and maybe I should, because it's like, even just talking about it, I'm getting like sweaty. If I want that to change, it's my responsibility to communicate that with clients in advance. Do not bring food or drink into my shop. I don't want it on my cute glass table. I don't want to throw away your empty coffee cup because it's going to smell. So I could clearly and fairly present that information to them in advance, but if I don't, it's also on me if they bring in that beverage. This is another really small example, but it would really get under my skin when brides would show up early. They'd pop in, I'd be in the middle of a fitting with a bride and they come in, oh, hey, 15, 20 minutes early because they're so excited. And then instead of leaving, they sit down on my couch and they just watch the fitting happening. And then I have to say, oh, actually, do you mind sitting in your car till your appointment time, which is 25 minutes from now? That was super uncomfortable. So what I did was I put that in their emails. Unfortunately, I do not have a waiting area at Sweet Francis So & Co. So please stay in your car until your appointment time. And that took care of that. It was clearly and fairly explained. So as you're going through your Bridezilla situation, is there something that you could have communicated differently or more clearly? And be honest with yourself. What wasn't clear to your client before they started working with you? My last difficult client was like 14 months ago. So I don't want to jinx anything, but it's been a while. And no, maybe it was even longer. It was 15 months. Anyway, who's counting, right? I look back on that situation and yes, there were a lot of in the situation, she was scary. Okay, let's get real. But because I was honest with myself, I also saw where in the process I could have changed what I said and how I delivered it so that it was not on me. You know what I'm saying? I was honest with myself. I actually changed one step in my booking process. And I also changed a clause in my contract, right? We're always updating our contracts to reflect these kind of situations, but we can only update them accurately if we're honest with ourselves in knowing what the heck could have been done differently to empower ourselves for the future. And that is how we're taking that power back and living at cause because we get to be responsible for what is communicated to our clients. We get to educate them. We get to set our own boundaries and with ourselves clarify what are my boundaries, what will not fly. And once you give an inch, they take a mile. I don't know what it is, but it's like every client that I've ever like bent the rules for, they become like the crazies. So you learn these things, honestly reflect, and then change your process for the future. And that is such a game changer, I promise you. Okay, if you have questions on that, I know that's like such a huge topic and there's so many different avenues that we can go down, but for sake of time, I want to move on to our final point because I know you have other trainings that you want to get to in this symposium too. So if you have questions about that topic, you can reach out to me. You can send me an email or DM me on Instagram, Secrets of Bridal Seamstress on the IG. Okay, moving forward. The final tip is how to close the chapter and move on. And this really, I feel like, needs some type of physical closure. It might sound or feel kind of cheesy, but I don't care. It has worked for me, and I know what I need to do to move on from any professional conflict. Okay. So, number one, update your contract. So, I know I just talked about that, but once you honestly reflect, update that contract so that you have it in writing. You recognize what step could be different for a better outcome, and you put that in your contract for the next bride. It's almost like, okay, well, now I know how to avoid that person in the future, and I got it in writing. Okay, phew. This next step, it is so helpful. Okay, please don't make fun of me, but I would encourage you to journal about this experience and take it one step further. Journal a letter to the client or whoever is in this professional conflict with you. Now, don't mail it. Okay, you do not need to mail it. Do not email them anything. It's fine. Like, no communication. Okay. But journaling through this and particularly journaling a letter, it is so helpful because number one, it's going to help you. Nobody else is going to see this letter, by the way. It's just for you. You can even burn it once you write it. But when you're writing it down, you are writing what's in your heart. Especially when you know that nobody's going to see this thing, you're just writing what is heavy on your heart, and then you're seeing it on paper. And it's like, oh, sometimes it's like, that's what I was thinking. Okay. You write it through. When I think back to that first Bridezilla, air quotes Bridezilla because she wasn't really Bridezilla. Poor Lindsay. I remember thanking her in that letter because she taught me so much about myself. She taught me the tools that I really needed to serve brides in a high stress situation. She told me communication skills that I didn't have. And she didn't know this, obviously, but I was so grateful for her. Like it was such a difficult experience and it happened right before I was going on vacation. So I carried that with me through my whole week and a half vacation. It was awful, but I learned so much from it. And she has helped so many Sweet Francis Sewing Co. brides because of what I went through with her. Like, I will never go through that with another bride because she gave me so much insight. And when we can look at a situation like that with another person who's been difficult, it gives us so much grace and it gives us so much love for the opposite person, right? Instead of thinking of it as like, I'm a victim, they're psycho. No, they're not. Well, they might be psycho, but, or we can look at them with compassion and think, wow, they were such a tool to teach me this is what I need to do better. This is how I need to communicate better. This is how I can serve future clients better. And I wouldn't have known this if it weren't for this person. And so you can include, if you feel like you need to include like an apology in there, okay, but thank this person for what you've learned. And then you can even just, like I said, it's your own letter for your eyes only. So you can describe how you felt and how you felt in the moment and how you're feeling now, what you're going to do differently for yourself to move forward, and then end the letter with a thank you. And then you can burn it. You can tear it up. I don't know what you can smash it in water. I don't know, but you can destroy the letter somehow. But that is, for me, has been a really beautiful way to close any icky chapter. And then it also almost takes the responsibility away of how the other person is thinking of you, if that makes sense. Because you know in your heart, like, okay, I've moved on. I have peace with myself. I have peace with them. And however they look back on this experience, it's not my responsibility. And I need to move on and take care of myself. And I need to move on and take care of my future brides and make sure my studio is ready to welcome those future brides, right? So this has been like a really, I don't know, like a healing process for me. And those tools have helped me so much, from looking at the situation with a bird's eye view, separating myself emotionally from the situation, limiting who I'm talking to about this situation, like capping it at 3 people, maybe, not regurgitating it over and over and over, being honest with myself of what could be different, and then just having that closure of writing the letter and then having it be done. And if need be, I've definitely updated my contract. I mean, probably, yes, every difficult client or bridezilla, there has been a contract update, and it's normal. And that just proves that I am learning through this and I'm continuing to grow. So I hope the same is for you. And I hope these tools help you just to recognize that you're not alone in this situation. And when you feel like this trauma of difficult clients or the words that they say to you, or just that feeling of like that shaking feeling, you can let it go and you can still meet the next client with just like 100% open arms and an open heart. And you don't have to move forward in this industry feeling like jaded or compromised at all. It's like you get to take your power back because you're living at cause with each situation. So I hope this really helps you. And if you have any questions about anything that I talked about, please feel free to reach out. Again, our membership is opening in March. March 1st, 2025 is when our doors open, and we would love to have you as a member of Secrets of Bridal Seamstress. We also have retreats throughout the year, 2 a year. That's something recent that we started doing. So our January retreat is actually sold out. But we have a waiting list for the next retreat, which will be in Scottsdale, Arizona. So hopefully you could join us then if you want to think about that. All right, thank you, and you know where to find me.